Hi everybody, I'm Pam Bador and I want to do a quick introduction to young adult dystopias. YA, or young adult literature, is a specific marketing category used in libraries and bookstores, brick and mortar and online alike. Technically, young adult fiction is aimed at readers aged 12 to 18. But in actuality, about half of the readers of YA titles are actually 18 or older. I find that really interesting. Why are adult readers so attracted to this category of fiction? The one thing pretty much all YA novels have in common is a teen protagonist, a main character who is 12 to 18 years old. Other than that, we find lots of variety. The main subject matter for YA is topics important to teens: the challenges of growing up, of constructing and maintaining your personal identity, of becoming an independent person, and of having good relationships, whether they're friendships or romantic relationships. Why would those topics be of interest to adults? Well, as a middle-aged adult myself, I can tell you that those topics don't stop being interesting just because you're closer to the middle of your life than the beginning. There was a great study in 2018. The results were published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, but also covered on NPR and other news outlets, that reported on a 50-year study of almost 2,000 people. It showed that although some traits do stay the same across a lifetime, most people report that they change a fair bit in each decade of their life. That definitely matches with my experience. So even though the adolescent years are a time of especially dramatic change, a time when people are really trying to figure out who they are and who they might become, it's certainly not the only time for those decisions. And YA genres track somewhat with the genres generally enjoyed by adult readers, with the exception that there aren't all that many YA detective novels. Instead, the top genres in YA fiction are contemporary fiction, fantasy, romance, and dystopia. Now, why is dystopia one of the most popular genres for YA fiction? After all, dystopia is interested in sociology, economics, politics, etc. Are those really topics of interest to 12 to 18-year-olds? They probably are areas of interest for many young people, but even more importantly, changing up social, economic, and political systems creates a great setting for a young protagonist to face the challenges examined in all YA literature: growing up, gaining independence, developing personal identity, and making important relationships. A dystopian setting can bring to the fore all kinds of critiques of contemporary society that are also of just as much interest to young people as to adults. It can also, optimistically, provide a sense, through negative example, of what a better future might look like. And that's very important to young people. We got an extremely influential YA dystopia in 1993 with Lois Lowry's highly acclaimed The Giver, the novel that has been taught in many middle and high school classrooms. I really recommend this novel if you haven't read it. We see here a totalitarian society through the eyes of a 12-year-old boy who thinks he lives in a utopia until he comes of age and starts to question the restrictions he has always accepted as necessary. He finds, in this novel and even more explicitly in the sequels, that in order to keep people safe, his society has given up the most dangerous, but perhaps also the most precious aspects of life, like music, color, and love. This is a YA dystopia that many Americans can use as a touchstone as they read other novels in the genre. A less well-known but also highly recommended young adult dystopia is from Canadian writer Cory Doctorow. Little Brother, published in 2008, is speaking back to George Orwell's Big Brother surveillance system from 1984. This is a really fascinating novel about the ability of young people to speak back against restrictive measures and to rebel against the government if and when it curbs freedom. Doctorow is a big advocate for copyleft, the idea that copyright is a negative feature that just benefits big corporations. So all his novels are freely available online as well as through major publishers. It's the reader's choice whether to pay for them or not. In Little Brother, which has a great adventure story, there's also lots of well-sourced information about all kinds of activism, including hacktivism. Also coming out in 2008, we saw a huge young adult dystopia franchise, Suzanne Collins's The Hunger Games. This trilogy and the movie versions were enormously popular and also serve as a kind of touchstone for youth rebellion. Katniss Everdeen is a great central character, a very strong young woman who starts out as a tribute in a game show to the deaf, but who ends up being a military leader and a symbol for the revolution. The idea of extreme inequality within a society being papered over by game shows and other entertainments really struck a chord with a lot of this franchise's readers and viewers. And there was a flurry of other dystopias that came out in the next few years that built on a number of the tropes Collins used. One of these, also an enormously popular book series and movie series, was Veronica Roth's Divergent, whose first novel was published in 2011. One thing I really like about these novels is the knowledge that Roth was herself barely more than a young adult when she published the first book. Divergent certainly isn't as well crafted as Hunger Games, but it also has a great central female character and a terrifying dystopian society in which it's young people who have to take control and create a better future. That's one of the themes of many YA dystopias. When a young person realizes that they live in a dystopia, they don't just conform and make the best of it. They rebel in all kinds of ways. Which brings us to the final novel I want to look at here today, M.T. Anderson's 2002 novel, Feed. First, let me say with enormous admiration for Anderson that it's unbelievable to me that this novel was published in 2002. It's so prescient in so many ways. But here's what I want you to think about as you read this book. When so many YA dystopias are about young protagonists coming to a realization about the weaknesses of their societies and planning and effecting a rebellion against a totalitarian regime, what in the world is happening in Anderson's novel? And what do you think he is saying with this story? Let me leave you with a few key questions as I close this quick overview of some especially influential YA dystopias. When you're reading Feed and any of these other novels, consider: how are the protagonists represented? What challenges are presented by their dystopian society? What is the critique of contemporary society? In what ways, if any, does the novel gesture at imagining a brighter future? In what ways, if any, do YA dystopias differ from dystopias for adults? Think about all that stuff, and happy reading!